Come to order. Members, as you can see, the Sergeant at Arms is still passing out some documents that the chairs would like all committee members to have, and so apologize for the delay in getting all those and starting the meeting today, but we did want to get those to you. Members, the purpose of today's meeting is just simply to give some sort of roadmap to the committee members about the way that the chairs intend to at least initiate this process. Chair intends to call on Senator Newton momentarily. After that, the chair will call on Erica Churchill from legislative staff. Ms. Churchill is going to give an overview of the ISD setup, how members can go about drawing maps on computers. She's going to talk some, I think, about public records, and she's going to talk some about the ways that legislative confidentiality may be a bit different on the redistricting committee than you might be used to in some of the other committees that you serve on. After that, the chair is going to put forth some scheduling, at least for next week, for committee members so that you all can go ahead and have an idea of what the chairs intend to do next week. With that being said, the chair will recognize Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members and members of the public, thank you for being here. I'm reminded in this packed room of some comments made at a redistricting conference several of us attended in Salt Lake City a couple of weeks ago, and the comments were made from the podium that, 10 years ago you couldn't draw a fly to a redistricting discussion, and now everybody is interested in redistricting. And I asked Senator Blue if he thought he had been involved in more redistrictings than anyone else in this room, and his response was, how about anyone in history? So we're going to lean on you heavily through this process. Obviously, 2021 redistricting process is unique because of COVID-19 and the resulting delay in the decennial census data. We're getting a much later start than we do in a normal redistricting year. These events are beyond our control, but we plan to carry out our constitutional duty as a legislature to draw new maps for Congress, the Senate, and the House in a timely manner with opportunity for public input and a deliberative legislative process that will involve members of both parties and be transparent to all North Carolinians. In just a bit, as the chair mentioned, Erica Churchill from our Legislative Analysis Division will cover the nuts and bolts of the legislative redistricting process, including our timeline. But first, I just want to say that I think North Carolina is in a unique position as we embark on this next decade's redistricting process. We know there are a lot of contentious legal battles behind us in the last decade, and the shifting sands of the legal doctrines associated with redistricting during the 2010 cycle produced several rounds of map drawing, both for Congress and state legislative districts. But by 2019, this body was able to engage in a process that members of both parties largely supported and was transparent and open to public input. I think both the House and the Senate expect that we would largely stick to that successful formula and that process that involved produced successful redistricting product at the end of the last decade. And as chairs, we welcome input from the minority party about as we proceed, and every member of this committee, about how we can further improve the process as we move forward. And as this committee continues to do its work, I hope we all have open communication as in order to ensure that we're doing the people's business in such a way as they have the opportunity to participate and feel that this process reflects the input from people all across North Carolina. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we look forward to learning from the past to have the best process we've ever had going forward.
Thank you, Senator Newton. Chair is going to recognize Erica Churchill. Ms. Churchill, you can speak from your seat there. You can come up to the podium over here, whichever one you prefer. And members, did everyone receive 2 sheets of paper from the Sergeant at Arms? Any members not receive both of those sheets? Seeing none.
I think Representative Zachary.
We've got a hand back here, so the Sergeant at Arms will ensure that the gentleman has both sheets. Ms. Churchill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of these two sheets, I'm going to start with the one that has writing on the front and the back. Both of these are ISD policies that parallel the policies of the 2011 redistricting cycle. For those of you who were here, you will remember we central staff are available to assist you in drawing maps. We use a software package called Maptitude. It is something that our folks in ISD, who are the true experts in data analysis and data processing, they assist us with that. And these policies simply say they help us. They are our support in learning that software, maintaining that software, and helping you utilize that software to produce the map. In addition to that, you have the opportunity to use that software directly if you want to. And the general public also has the opportunity to use that software with our database information in it if they choose to. That's what the very first piece of this policy is about, is public access. It says that ISD will provide at least one terminal. Right now, the plan is to have two as we begin the decade, so that members of the General Assembly and members of the public can sign up to use those terminals directly. I would note that when you choose to do it that way, ISD will help you in learning the software. ISD is not there to maneuver the software for you. ISD is not there to provide you with legal assistance or advice. They are simply your technical assistant. The same is true for the public. They ask that you schedule those appointments in advance. For the public, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 are the hours. For members of the General Assembly, it can be scheduled in advance in congruence with ISD, making certain that there will be staff there to assist you if you need to stay until 5:30 or something of that nature. Remember that you are responsible for copies of all of your files if you choose to draw this way. You will also be asked to use the naming conventions so that there are no duplicates of names in the public record. As Chairman Hall mentioned, there's something slightly different with legislative confidentiality and redistricting. The statutes do say that certain things do become a public record upon enactment of the plans. Obviously, for members of the general public using the system, they are creating a public document at the moment it is done. For public comment or public input, the General Assembly ISD staff will, at the directions of the committee chairs, make available to the general public a comment form to receive anything they want to say to the members of the committee about redistricting. It will be open as the chairs instruct. Reports will come to the members of the committee as the chairs instruct. It will close as the chairs instruct. Moving on to the second page. The posting of plans to the website. As we neared the end of the decade, last decade, our General Assembly committees had stepped up to technology and availability, and in general, almost all of our standing committees have a web page that is maintained by the committee clerks for the posting of documents before that committee. That is how the redistricting committees will work. For plans and amendments that are being considered by the committee, the clerks will post that information as instructed by the chairs on the timing instructed by the chairs. With respect to any bills that are before the chamber floor, that same information, the plans and the associated statistical data along with maps and block and shape files, will be available, posted by the Information Systems Division, associated with the bill status page for that bill before the chamber floor. Any member of the public desiring additional information is free to write to in some fashion or form, including by email, to get that information from ISD. You will only be given the public record if you are a member of the public. If you were seeking something that is still a confidential record, it will be up to the holder of that confidentiality to determine whether you have access. And lastly, plan imports. This happened a couple of times during the last decade. The General Assembly can import a plan from outside of the General Assembly. However, it needs to be in some sort of block and shape assignment file that our system can read. That Desired import will be checked for viruses and things of that nature. If it will harm our network system, it is subject to being declined for import. Any of those imports would need to be at the request of a member of the General Assembly. And the second page is the public user access agreement. I would note a couple of things about this. Anyone that comes in from the general public will be asked to sign this agreement in order to use the General Assembly Maptitude and database. They will be asked to sign that they have been offered a copy of the general statutes related to public records because they are going to be creating a public record. They will be reminded that it is their responsibility to keep a copy of any of the plans and the associated data that they create, especially if they want to come back and work on it at a future time. And they also agree to use the naming conventions to avoid that duplication of names in the system. And that is all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Churchill. Do any members have questions for Ms. Churchill? And she'll be Representative Harrison. Ladies recognized.
I'm not sure if this is for Ms. Churchill or for the chairs, but regarding public comment and public input. So if I understand this correctly, the public will have access to the terminals to possibly draw their own versions of the maps. But I'm wondering, and then there'll be public comment input through some form. But if I remember from 2019 redraw, we had the portal and the public could put comments on, but those comments weren't available to the public, if I remember that correctly. And will that be different during this process?
And Representative Harrison, the chair will take that question. The answer to that is it's going to be up to this committee. I anticipate a similar process to what we've used in the past, and so if those comments weren't public to others, then they may not be this time. But a decision about that specific question hasn't been made by the chairs yet. But we would love to hear your input about what you would like to see happen.
Follow up.
Ladies
and I very much appreciate that, and I appreciate the cooperative nature of the 2019 redraw. And at some point, is that happening today where you would like suggestions along those lines, along transparency and public input? Is that for this meeting, or is that down the road?
That would be appropriate to some degree today. And again, some of this is going to be clarified when the chair gives a little bit of the idea of the schedule moving forward. But certainly if the lady has some suggestion, I will tell the committee today that the chairs intend to have staff send out today the 2019 criteria and to go ahead and open up the portal for open public comment. And so that will happen at some point after this committee meeting today. So if any members have suggestions on the way to do that public comment, again, just on the online version, there's going to be opportunity for in-person public comment that the chair will get to momentarily. But if the lady has suggestions about the online version or any other members have suggestions, go ahead and put those forth.
Well, I would just like to comment on that because I heard concerns from individuals who weren't able to access the other public comments and I don't know any reason why we wouldn't make them available. So I'd like to offer my encouragement that we include the public online comments be made available to the public. I think it's always helpful for contributing to debate to know what others are thinking. If you're talking about other kind of public access, I will wait until this next presentation because I have some concerns about that as well.
Noted. Any other questions for Ms. Churchill?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Clark.
Yes, I have a question regarding plan imports. Will the formats that are generated by online systems such as Districtor as well as, what's the other one, Dave's Redistricting app, do they comply with this?
Ladies recognized.
Senator Clark, I'm happy to look into that. As long as they have some ability to save those plans in a block assignment or a shapefile, they would comply with this.
Okay, thank you. Question, Mr. Chair?
Gentleman's recognized.
Also, you indicated that you all would be providing some forms of criteria, I think, from 2019. I would also like to submit Senate Bill 581, which I filed earlier, which has recommended criteria for distribution to the committee members, if that so please the chair.
The gentleman's so welcome to send the committee whatever he pleases. And the gentleman may want to wait a moment to hear the rest of the plan, and we can come back to you if you still want to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions for Ms. Churchill? If not, thank you, Ms. Churchill. She's going to hang around for a moment, so if any questions come up. Members, now to the schedule, at least insofar as it's been decided at this point. You all know that the data was delayed due to COVID. That's the census data that has been delayed. You've heard some about that already. We're waiting on that data to come. It's going to be here, I think, August 15th or 16th. But then it takes a period of time, once you get that data, for staff to load it into the computers here for it to be useful for this committee to be able to draw. That, of course, creates a problem for this committee because, as we all know, the filing for the 2022 election is to take place in December of this year. The chair is informed that the Board of Elections needs at least 3 weeks lead time in order to be able to draft ballots, of course. So they need these new maps at least 3 weeks, and they'd like to have more time than that, really would like to have 4, before that December 6th the date that filing opens. And so that puts this committee in a position of essentially having to try to get something done, get maps done at some point, probably early November, and chairs believe that this committee can certainly do that. That's why we're starting now here in August, even though we're in the midst of budget debate. The House is going to have their budget out soon, and then, of course, we'll go into conference with the Senate. So there's a lot going on here. And so the chairs have essentially decided that the best course moving forward is to have this meeting today, give you some sort of overview, but to go ahead and give you a schedule for next week. So the chairs next Thursday intend to have another meeting where the chairs intend to vote on some proposed criteria for drawing the maps, for this committee's drawing of the maps. That schedule will essentially be this, and I'll try to give you as much specificity as I can. As I've already said, at the end of the committee today, the portal will open for public comment. Staff is going to send out the 2019 criteria. If Senator Clark wants, of course, his bill to be sent out, the chair will so direct staff to do that. The chairs intend to have the chair's proposed criteria out at least by the end of the day on this coming Monday, if not before. This committee then will meet on Monday, August 9th at 3 o'clock. You'll get a notice sent out and plenty of time. In fact, that notice will probably go ahead and be sent out today so that everyone can have plenty of time to know to be here Monday, August 9th at 3 o'clock. The purpose of that meeting will be discussion only for this committee to discuss criteria. And let me say, any committee member can put forth whatever set of criteria that any committee member pleases. Committee members can go ahead and begin drafting those proposed criteria now. They can go ahead and start sending them into the chair. And Representative Richards, I'll get with you in just 1 second. If I let me finish this. But obviously, if members can have those in as soon as they can, that will be helpful. Because, as the chair said, we plan to vote on Thursday on whatever set of criteria this committee is going to use. So that's for discussion on Monday. Then on Tuesday, August 10th, the chairs intend to take public comment on proposed criteria. That public comment will begin at 8:30 in the morning, and the chairs will have some sort of system in place to make sure that all of those who want to be heard will be heard. After that meeting, there will be no meeting on that Wednesday of next week of this committee, but on Thursday, August 12th, sometime after the House adjourns that day, and probably we're going to peg it at 30 minutes after the House adjourns on Thursday, August 12th, the chairs intend to take up some set of criteria to be approved to use for redistricting by this committee. After that, then the chairs anticipate, that leaves a couple of weeks left in August, and the chairs anticipate using those 2 weeks to set up a public hearing schedule. So we will likely have some meeting where we can talk about what the schedule is going to look like, what members want to see in public hearings. Do you want it to be all right here in Raleigh, or do you want it to be across the state? The chair anticipates desire to have it across the state. But we need to talk about where and when and how. So we'll have a meeting to discuss those things. And then finally, at some point, and the chair intends to do this by the end of August, to actually to vote on a public hearing schedule. So this committee will actually vote on a public hearing schedule by the end of August. As far as when those public hearings will be, that's the purpose of our meeting, to discuss and talk about what that looks like. With that being said, Representative Richardson, the gentleman is recognized.
And I think you answered my question with the public hearing schedule. Will we decide what the criteria or what will be discussed, what will be allowed in public input in the, for example, let's say the public wants to strongly voice their opinion that there ought to be an independent commission. Will that be received? Will that type of input be received, or is it just strictly how the maps are drawn?
Well, Representative Richardson, the chair anticipates just opening up public hearing, and, you know, if folks want to, if they want to talk about redistricting or anything else, they're certainly welcome to show up and be heard. The chair anticipates the real purpose is to hear just generally about redistricting and whatever it is that's on an individual member of the public's mind. Some folks are more concerned about different parts of redistricting. So whatever element of redistricting a member of the public would like to discuss there, that's up to that member of the public to decide.
Follow up.
Gentleman's recognized.
Has the lateness of the census and the COVID problem basically, from a logistics standpoint, almost ruled out any type of public redistricting process this time?
Well, I guess I would ask the gentleman, what do you mean by the public redistricting process?
Like having the public or a public committee draw the lines.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a policy consideration for this committee, and any member can put forth. I think Senator Clark's got a bill that I haven't read, so I don't know what's in it, but it may have something to do with that. And members can put forth those bills, and it's a decision for this committee to make.
Yeah. One last comment.
Gentleman's recognized.
I've always liked that, but it seems like we're really up against the wall in terms of, you know, what is expected of us constitutionally in terms of getting it done and having that type of mechanism. The lateness of the census and the COVID issue really has put us up against a really big timeline.
You're absolutely right. It has put us up against the wall. And again, that's why the chairs decided to go have this meeting today as we're in the thick of the budget in the House, because we really felt like we needed to act as soon as we possibly could, because again, it's going to take some lead time to get that data put into the computer system. But the chairs are confident that we can do what the Constitution requires us, and that is draw these maps and do it in a timely manner without even having to change any filing deadlines, so long as we stick to this schedule and we've got this roadmap in place. And then as we get into September, it'll be up for the committee to decide how to move forward. Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, I know that it'll take some time to convert the data to a usable form, as opposed to waiting for the Census Bureau to give it to us, I guess, a month from next week, from the 15th of August. How long are you thinking it will take our people in ISD to convert the data into a usable form, based on the data that's presented on August 15th?
Senator Blue, and I'm going to recognize Ms. Churchill in just a moment. As I understand it, it's going to take about 3 weeks. And as I understand it, part of that calculation is them knowing what criteria this committee intends to use, because that in some way speaks to how they upload this data and which data they need to upload. But the short answer to your question, I believe it's about 3 weeks. Ms. Churchill, ladies recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Blue, Chairman Hall, we are definitely estimating roughly 3 calendar weeks. And that will give time not only to import the raw data, but to do some quality assurance to make sure that we have imported it correctly. With that, even if the formal data that normally has come, like what is going to be released on September 30th, that still takes time to import into the system, because you are merging together multiple pieces of information into multiple places. So just kind of remember that. But with that 3 weeks, hopefully we'll be ready, the system would be ready for anyone who wanted to draw if the committee were ready to draw.
Senator Blue.
So that I understand it correctly, after Monday, your criteria, that is the chair's criteria for drawing, will be available to the general public. But immediately following this meeting, or at least following this meeting, in a relatively short time, the public will have access to the portal so that they can give comment or suggestions on criteria. They don't have to wait until you send out the criteria so that they're reacting to that.
That's exactly right, Senator Blue. Members can begin making comment today after this committee meeting.
Okay.
Yep. Senator Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it the intent of the chair that the criteria will also deal with the process by which we establish county cluster groupings for use in legislative redistricting?
Well, if I understand the gentleman's question correctly, there is a process for the county groupings that must be had, and it's essentially a math problem. So we have to follow the Constitution, of course. We have to do the whole county provision. And so the answer is yes, the chair does intend to follow the law on the whole county provisions.
Okay, let me be a little bit more clear. Yes, there is a mathematical problem, but does the committee have a process by which it will select from amongst the constitutionally compliant maps that emerge from that mathematical process?
Yeah, and that's part of what the committee will be deciding after we adopt criteria, is moving into that first phase of adopting those groupings at that point. And so, again, it will be up to the committee to decide what's the process that we're going to use to adopt those groupings.
Okay, well, I have a recommendation for that also. I'll send it to you.
Send it to me. Senator Blue.
If I could follow up to that. With respect to choosing the groupings, the criteria that is developed will apply to that as well. I mean, I know what the standard criteria will be, but even that will apply to the groupings, the clusters, and as well as when we get down to the individual districts that we start formulating. Okay.
Further discussion or debate? Representative Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. To clarify, we're talking about public comments after the data is released, but before the maps are drawn, and then a public commenting process after the maps are drawn?
That's right.
Perfect. Thank you. Separately, a question about transparency. We all received a letter on August 2nd, I think all the members of the committee, from a coalition of good government groups concerned about the redistricting process, and there was a whole list of concerns about transparency. I appreciate that the 2019 redraw was the most transparent redistricting process we've had in this legislature, at least that I'm aware of, but the bar was really low. And there were a lot of concerns that were expressed about inability to hear members clustered around a terminal, or people going out of the room and coming back with maps and that sort of thing. I just wondered if we are going to be talking about a transparency proposal for this process.
Well, and the lady is welcome to put forth whatever she wants to as part of a proposed plan as to how to actually come in and draw those maps. The chair will simply say, as the lady stated, the 2019 process was the most, it's not even arguable, but it was the most transparent process of redistricting in this state's long history. And so the chair is generally comfortable with the process that was used in 2019. But again, that's the purpose of these committee meetings, is to hear from members. And this chair will certainly take into consideration any members' suggestions.
Just a quick follow-up. I actually think that the letter that these groups sent us actually contains a list of really solid suggestions about how to improve the transparency of what was otherwise a much better process, much improved process of 2019. And if I could just add, if we could have our future meetings in the larger room, if it's available, I would be grateful. Thank you.
The chair anticipates having future meetings in larger rooms, but appropriations being a meeting. We'll likely the next week have to meet back in here again because of House Appropriations meeting upstairs. But after that, the chair will commandeer, in his role as rules chair, will commandeer the room upstairs, and I think Senator Rabin will agree with that.
Thank you.
Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Harrison, thank you for that question. it helps us to make a finer point about this committee's role in what the rules of the road for map drawing will be. And that, I think, is what you're getting at. And even though Ms. Churchill did a great job explaining what maps can and cannot be imported into the state system, that doesn't mean probably doesn't mean, depending on the wisdom of this committee, you can sit at home and draw your own map and submit it, and this committee is going to consider that. There will be rules for the consideration of maps by this committee that this committee will design, and that input you just described is exactly what we need to see to make those decisions. Thank you.
Further discussion or debate or comments? Members, the chair will also make clear that, the chair laid out the timeline and essentially an end-stop deadline that the committee has if we don't want to move filing. And that filing opens on December 6th. According to the Board of Elections, we would need to get these maps done sometime in November. But it's the chair's intention to get it done sooner than that and as soon as we possibly can, of course, because we want folks to have some idea of what the districts are going to look like before the day of filing. So it will be this committee's goal to get this thing done as quickly as possible. And as evidenced by having this meeting today, going ahead and trying to put forth some criteria in the next week to vote on it, and then having essentially an expedited schedule to get some public comment in, and then we'll move through that public comment at the committee's will, and hopefully come back in here and draw maps and get them done as quickly as we reasonably can under the law. With that said, if there are no further comments or questions, there being no further business before the committee is now adjourned.